Hi, my name is Pamela Goodwin. My middle name is Louise. I'm named after both of my grandmothers. Grammy Louise is my mother's mother, and Grammy Louise is my father's mother, who lived up in Charlemont. Also, I have a life notebook that I didn't bring here today, but I thought it would be kind of fun to talk a little bit about my earlier days in childhood because they were pretty tumultuous, and there's a lot that happened from the time that I was born. My mother was born in Gillette, Wyoming, and my father was born in Fremont, Indiana. I'll start by saying they met during World War II. I have a picture of them on their wedding day, and he wanted to sign up after high school because of Pearl Harbor, and his mother said, "You cannot go yet, get your diploma." So he went into the Army, and then they discharged him honorably and told him to go learn to fly airplanes. They caught wind that he wanted to be a pilot. So they sent him to Nebraska, where he met my mother in a dance hall, and this is their wedding photo. And my older brother was born in Nebraska. My younger sister was born in Scottsbluff, Nebraska, but I was born in the town of Greenfield, which of course now is called a city. So that's the scoop with my parents. It's a very cool love story, and I have love letters from my father that he wrote back to his mother about how much in love he was with my mother, whose name was Fern. So that's a little background about them. I was born in 1948, right over here at Franklin Medical Center, but it was, of course, not called a medical center at that time, way when it was just one little building before they started expanding all those years ago. So I'm now 77, and my aunt, who's no longer with me, raised me part of the time. We called her Nanny. She always said I should write a book of my life story. And I said, "Oh, sure, can't wait." It's never happened, and so Bella offered me the opportunity to talk a little bit about who I am and what I've become, and I'm starting in the younger days. I'll do something later on. So being born in Greenfield, after my older brother was born in Nebraska, my mom and dad came back out here to be with his family in Charlemont, Mass. And as I said, my sister was born back out there. So my mom was missing her family, so they bounced from Nebraska, which is here, back to New England, which is here. I'm the middle child, the oldest daughter, and then they went back to Nebraska where my younger sister was born. My younger sister was born in 1950, so here I am as a teeny tiny tot. She was a preemie, like fit in a cigar box in 1950. I have no idea how they kept her alive, because in those days they wouldn't have had the NIC units that we have nowadays. So this is me. I didn't have much hair. I was bald until I was over a year old, and you can see I've got all this thick hair now. Somebody colored in hair here on this photo. My older brother, John Raymond Goodwin, is the older. He's about 4 years older than I was. So that's our little tiny pictures. I have other pictures of us in black and white. I kind of like this one because my brother has a train track. That's me standing next to my older brother before I think my sister was probably born. Somebody wrote on it too, "Thought you would like these Christmas pictures." I was about a year and a half or so. I had a dog named Ginger. I learned to walk by holding on to our beloved pet named Ginger, which you'll hear about later. The last picture I'll show you about, like when we're young, is my father's in a flap jacket. My mother's got a scarf on next to them. He's holding me, and then there's my older brother, John. John Raymond was named after my father's co-pilot who perished on D-Day, and I have a different DVD I did about that. So my brother's middle name became Raymond. He was born, of course, in Nebraska while my father was over fighting World War II. So moving forward, my goal was, like my aunt said, to write the story, and I came across this amazing book, My Life, My Story, and it says A Mother's Legacy Journal. And when I sat with Bella the second time around, who's filming me, I said to her, it created trauma in my life. I opened it up. I said, ooh, I'd love to leave my kids something they could read. It is from a Christian bookstore, and the table of contents has everything from introduction, me at a glance, a few of my favorite things, my life as a little girl. It goes on to say my education, me on the job, my love story, my life as a parent, and goes all the way through. So it has an amazing table of contents. However, once I got it home and I started looking at it, I was like, oh, I don't want to think about some of this stuff, and you'll hear why in a minute. As a child, my favorite thing to do was, here's what I remember most about my childhood home, and it goes through some other stuff. I probably could do, my favorite childhood toy was, my favorite book was, back then my favorite place to be was, I loved this place because. So putting together this CD, this presentation has made me realize, thankfully, that I probably could at least fill out some things without feeling too traumatized about things. Because I really just opened up to a couple of places, and what do you remember most about your mom would make me almost want to burst into tears. So you'll hear why in a minute, but I highly recommend something like this, A Mother's Legacy Journal. I'm sure they make them also for dads to leave behind for their children too. I have a 44-year-old son, Matthew Jacob Harris. John is about 54 years old, Jonathan, Kelsey Harris, and then my daughter is the middle one, and Adrian Harris Walton. And two of the families don't live near me here in Greenfield. So this never happened. However, a lot of other cool things happened in my life. I want to say this one quote, because one of the times when I was kind of in between places to live, I lived with a woman named Lorraine, and I had this life notebook where I pulled out these things. And her coffee cup said, whatever a woman does, she must do twice as well as a man to be considered half as good. Luckily, this is not difficult. And I read that cup and I thought, I'm writing that down, I'm going to put it in my life's notebook. Because I think when I look at my story, well, I don't think, I know, I'm absolutely a survivor in a lot of different ways. And I loved Lorraine's coffee cup, and I did live up in her attic for a while. So I think that's important. Then, moving from Nebraska. So my father was in the lumber business once he got out of the war, and he came back here to Charlemont, Mass. And in the lumber business, he decides that he's going to learn to grade lumber. All of his brothers, his stepfather, everybody was in the lumber business. It was called Carroll's Lumber Company up in Charlemont, very famous business for a while. And then he decides he's going to go down by himself to Memphis, Texas. So I drew this little map here to kind of track who's going where, why. So he leaves Charlemont. My mother has 3 kids, birds, dog named Ginger, up here with his relatives, and he goes alone to Memphis, Tennessee, and it was at that time the only place where he could learn to actually grade lumber. So later, he's down here, she piles 3 kids, a bird cage, the dog, all our belongings, bicycles on the top of a U-Haul, and I was about 3 or 5 years old. I think I left during kindergarten or first grade. So she piles us all in, drives us alone down to Memphis, and we were there temporarily. She was going to leave the bikes behind, but my uncle said the kids are going to need bikes. So that's us coming from New England temporarily to Memphis. And the point was to come on down to Houston, Texas, here. So we were here for a few years, I don't know, months. I would say it was, just a few months. I can't remember that really well because I was pretty tiny, but I do know my brother forgot to take my hand and walk me back home said he was my older brother. So I think it was probably the elementary school was right around the corner from where we were staying. We landed down in Houston, Texas for many years, and so that's my Texas experience. By then, I'm probably first or second grade. The beloved couple, and I know they were madly in love for quite some time, ended up getting a divorce when I was in about the 5th grade. And I will say, I would rather have heard them argue a little bit than to have the bomb dropped where my mother sat down 3 kids and said, your dad is moving out. We had no idea there was any kind of strife, any kind of anything really, just this huge bomb where your father's leaving. And of course we wanted dad back in our lives for quite a while too. So that was when I was about the 5th grade. And the reason I'm talking about how old I was or what grade I was in high school is it's easier for me than to think, okay, I was born in 48, and what year did this happen, what year did this happen? This entire United States map is why I view myself as one of 3 orphans, and you'll see why in a minute. So 5th grade, there's a divorce. My father has remarried somebody, and I'm still in Houston. However, my mother decides after the divorce to date a man we called Daddy Morgan, John Morgan, who had a lake house outside of Houston, and they dated and then they married. When that happened, we left the lake house area, and my stepfather was in the oil well business. So he was a big supervisor for an oil well company, and he was relocated. This was his own property, beautiful place outside of Houston in a town called Cleveland. And we were then relocated to the panhandle of Texas, way up here in a little tiny town named Spearman, Texas. And my stepfather was very loving. He knew that my sister and I loved horses. He knew my mother grew up on a ranch in Wyoming and western Nebraska. And so he would always take us over to friends and let us ride their horses. So we went from water moccasin area of Houston, Texas, because I remember a whole lot of things about snakes that I don't like. My brother used to shoot snakes down on top of us with a gun at the lake house, and my younger sister and I would sit in this boat going like, we're gonna have a snake land in our lap any minute. Now it'll be dead, but we're gonna, like that was traumatizing enough. But he found a gun and was able to do all of that, and that's the lake house. Up here, we lived with rattlesnakes, and we saw a lot of rattlesnakes in the panhandle of Texas. So I have this phobia kind of thing about snakes because of my childhood. And one Christmas time, my parents were married less than a year, I think. We had a house down here on Lasky Street, and when my mother married my stepfather, we were in a mobile home on oil well property with some other people, and it was really great time. We had Porky the Pig, and we had, all kinds of fun things going on then. So at Christmas time, when they'd been married less than a year, I think, they decided to go home for Christmas and come back to the lake house. And my stepfather was getting ready to write a will that would have put us in the will. So at Christmas time down here, I was at the lake house, and my brother was downstairs in this big, beautiful house, and my sister and I had gone to bed. And my brother came up and said, wake up, girls, there's something that we might need to all wait and hear about. And I don't know whether he was told then or was told later, but local cops came to him and said there had been a horrible car accident. And on the 22nd of December, they had a head-on collision with a major truck and never survived. It was a fatal crash. I mean, their vehicle just went into this big truck and it just went right over it. So that night, we spent the night with friends of my stepfather up the road from the lake house once that news hit us. And my brother was only 4 years older. Every day of his life, he kept a Christmas tree up his entire life. I guess probably in memory of that horrible thing. So picture my mother's mother being in Nebraska out here, waiting for an uncle to arrive from Oregon. Uncle Buck came and Uncle Floyd had gone out to Oregon. She's waiting for them to come, pick her up by car, and they drove all the way down for the funeral, down into this Houston area. In the meantime, I didn't know this at the moment, but she also stopped in Spearman. She got a few of my mother's belongings. She had to tell the police, open it up. I need my daughter's belongings, and they got a few things. And those became mementos for me because we had no access to anything once all this chaos happened. So on the Christmas day was a double funeral for both my mother and my stepfather. And I'll never forget my stepmother, who I'd never met before, stomping her feet like a small child who's like pissed off. Her name was Blanche. And she said, I cannot believe we're taking these brats home. So unfortunately, my mother's relatives did not hear that, because I know damn well, pardon the French, that they would have said, you're going to get in the car with us and we're taking you back up to Nebraska. So my father, who was traumatized, I realized afterwards, from PTSD, from World War II, didn't protect us, and this horrific woman was in charge of our life. We lived with them in the house during the school year, and we were confined, my sister and I were confined to their bedroom, except for going to the bathroom, going to eat alone in the kitchen, or going to school, pretty much. That's your space, that's where you belong. I call her the step monster. There's a good movie about a stepmother, and that turns out nice, not mine. Mine was horrific. So, and my father never protected us, of course. I say of course because I think this is often the case with a very strong, aggressive person. And thank God we went to school, because I don't know what it would have been like to be living there. She was the kind of person who slammed doors. She wrote us notes in the bathroom, over in the kitchen. She had a relative around the corner, and we used to go over there in the morning before school some of the time. And otherwise, we just were in her way. And it was a horrible experience. I always say Harry Potter might have lived in a closet, but I was confined to a bedroom with my younger sister, who also was a bedwetter. And that's a whole nother scenario, because my stupid aunt would think that she was intentionally doing it. It kind of ran in parts of my family. I wasn't a bedwetter, but we were sharing a bed. So the good news out of that scenario is they would ship us off. School got out. Oh my God, we can't have these kids under our feet. So we would, my dad would make a phone call to my uncle and aunt in Scottsbluff, Nebraska. So school's out, and I was, by the way, I was 7th grade. So in 7th grade, this horrible accident happened. And, that's a tough time of anybody's adolescence, because your hormones are nuts anyway, let alone having all this family trauma. So my dad makes a phone call to my Uncle Ed up here in Scottsbluff, Nebraska. That's this pink thing. And we were shipped up there for the summers, and then we were shipped back down when school started. And no matter who we talked to, we couldn't convince anybody that we really shouldn't be there. Something was off. We didn't need to be there. Could we please not be back in this household? We just couldn't convince anybody. Even my brother couldn't convince anybody. My older brother was told, you're old enough to get off your ass and go out and get a job. And he made a phone call, and he escaped. So he escaped up to Scottsbluff, and he graduated from high school in Scottsbluff. Why he couldn't convince anybody else that we shouldn't be down there too, I have never even figured that out. So we're up into Scottsbluff in about, that would have been my 9th grade year. Yeah, at the end of the 9th grade year. My uncle, who was a supervisor for Kraft Foods, who was a territorial, like he drove all over Wyoming, South Dakota, Colorado. He's a big supervisor for Kraft. He makes a phone call to my dad and he goes, hey, we're moving from Scottsbluff. And we don't want the girls here. We're moving to Grand Island, Nebraska, which is the third largest city in I think it's second or third now, because Grand Island, Omaha's the largest, and then they moved to Grand Island, Nebraska. So my uncle, who later became my guardian, by the way, he makes a phone call to my dad, girls are coming back, school's not started, they go, hell no. And so he said, we're moving from Scottsbluff to Grand Island, so there's Grand Island, and we, little girls, are put on a bus. So this red string is, my father calls his mom and relatives, his mom and dad, he hadn't seen them since he married this woman down there, she wouldn't let him out of the area. And so we were put on a bus. So this big red yarn, my sister and I rode a bus all the way, halfway across the United States. We got off the bus in Williamstown. My stepfather, who we called Pop, and Grammy, they picked us up. So we're over here expecting, again, to probably be shipped back down, and we didn't get shipped back down. So this is just before what they later called my 10th grade year. So my brother, who got out of the Navy out here, way out in California, comes over to York Beach, Maine, to visit his cousins, and he dives into the water and he crushes 2 vertebrae and is drowning. I'm not there. I'm back in Charlemont, Mass, but my aunt Avery, Uncle Bud and Auntie Barbara were vacationing, and my cousin was there because she had a job at Ocean House, and she realized something must be wrong, he's floating too long. So they carefully pull him out of the ocean, and he's paralyzed. When that all happened, my sister and I, again, 2 years younger than me, we got to stay in Charlemont because we were, we were there. And we visited my brother frequently at Portland Medical Center. Later, he got moved to Albany Medical Center. It was a quicker trip for us to go and visit him. And he was paralyzed from the neck down. He also told the doctors, I don't want to be a vegetable, just leave everything be. And then later, he was able to walk, father a pair of twins. I mean, he had a horrible doctor who said, you're never going to walk, you're never going to father anybody. And so he was able to do all of that. And I have a twin niece and a twin nephew from this brother. So by him being hospitalized for so long, my sister and I got to stay in a loving environment. I was put in the 10th grade, and they didn't know where to put us, really. We had a southern drawl. We were saying, please, ma'am, yes, sir. Like, they just thought we were an anomaly. I said to a teacher, I'm staying with my aunt, and she said, excuse me? And she shamed me. She said, an aunt is an animal. You're staying with your aunt. And I thought, okay, whatever. But they loved our southern accent and our drawl and how polite we were. So that year, they put me in the 10th grade, and they put me in a junior math class with my cousin Kirk Avery, and they put my sister in, I think, the 8th or 9th grade. And it was a very small school. We became junior varsity cheerleaders. It was loving relatives. I'm like, wow, what is this? I must have fallen, like Toto. I'm in a different place. I'm no longer in a horrible place called Texas, and everybody was taking care of us. My aunt was buying us clothes. I don't know much else other than my sister, who was a raving beauty and very rebellious, who had never had any therapy for the trauma in her life, was giving my aunt a little bit of trouble. When my brother finally, he crushes his vertebrae in the summer, by Christmas he comes out of the hospitals and he's in the lower floor of my grandparents' house. That's where my sister and I were. And then he got the lower floor because of his disability. And then my sister and I moved upstairs to my aunt, the one we call Nani. And we were there for 1 year. And my sister, who was a raving beauty, was a problem. She was rebellious. Boys liked her. My aunt had a full-time job. Everybody had a job to do, and she was being difficult. So my loving grandmother, Grammy Louise in Charlemont, makes a phone call to my mother's mother, Grammy Louise, and the plan was, she's done all of this planning, and I had an aunt and Uncle Buck, the same one who came to my mother's funeral. Uncle Buck and Aunt Virginia were in La Grande, Oregon. So my Grammy says, you're going to go out and this aunt and uncle want you girls. And I'm like, yes. And I hardly remembered Uncle Buck, but he, I remember something about him. And we also have had reunions out in Oregon. So we get out to Grand Island, Nebraska, which is where my Grammy Louise was living. She gets in a car and she goes to see her relatives here, her sons. And we get stuck behind in Grand Island, Nebraska with the same aunt and uncle that we used to summer with. So we didn't ever figure out, other than when I was at college, they came and found me and said, I don't know what happened. So there wasn't room in the car, I guess, whatever was going on with here. We resided with Uncle Ed, who became my legal guardian, and my Aunt Faye, my youngest sister to my mother, and we stayed in Grand Island. And let me see if I've forgotten any of these legs anywhere. Nope, pretty much that's it. So I was here, and I knew I wanted to teach French ever since Charlemont days. I land in Grand Island Public High School. It's a big, huge high school, very different from the little tiny Charlemont High. I mean, I cried every classroom break. Every time between classes, I would go in the bathroom and I would just break into tears. I didn't know anybody. I didn't like that big place. I had one friend, and she and I would hang out together. But I wanted to be back where I felt like I was cared for and loved in New England. So that was my 11th and 12th grades, junior and senior year. My uncle used to scream and yell at me when he'd come home, and he said, suck it up. This is where you live. Stop that pouting around. And we made do. And he was gone all the time. So my aunt, who was very difficult, who I didn't think wanted us either. For one thing, Uncle Ed and Aunt Faye had no children. They had adopted a younger girl. So it wasn't like they already knew what parenting was, whereas like Uncle Buck and Virginia already raised 4 boys. They were so excited to have 2 girls come and live in their life. And they even adopted some Native American people. So after, I guess it was my senior year in high school, my aunt saves up all the things we did wrong, all 3 of us girls. Whatever we did wrong, he'd walk home from being gone all week, come through the door, she'd take him in the bedroom, fed him all the stuff she was ticked off at 3 teenagers for, including her own adopted daughter, and then he would come out and have a little talk with us. On the senior year, I said, you can't ship my sister back to Houston. So she, again, was very rebellious. My aunt did illegal things like wouldn't let her have mail. You can't withhold mail from people. She grounded my sister all the time. She told her she couldn't see anybody that she was friendly with in high school. And I stood up for her because I was the oldest sister and my brother's long gone. And so I said to my uncle, why would you send her back to that horrible place? And he said, well, That's what's going to happen. We'll keep you, and we're going to send her back. By standing up for her, he marched into my bedroom, and he said, pack your things. You are no longer living here, and I'm taking you to a motel. So I remember kind of going, whoa, I'm the goody. My sister always called me the goody two-shoes. So I'm the one that's behaving. I fight for the rights of my younger sister, because that's what siblings do normally, and I get thrown out of the house. So I no longer have access to my younger sister, to my mother's mother, Grammy Louise, and I'm just spending the night in this hotel. I remember calling up a boyfriend and saying, guess where I am? And he's like, where? And he goes, what? So the problem was, my aunt, who turns out to have been a drinker, and jealous of my mother quite a few years, took my youngest sister, my only sister, to therapy once and bitched and moaned to this psychiatrist person. And he ended up saying, she's a normal teenager, and I think that you're doing the best you can, not knowing, of course, that she's like a closet alcoholic. And he didn't want to charge her anything. And boy, this woman kept track of money, believe you me. So that was it for any kind of therapy that my younger sister ever had. And that's pretty much what happened. So I called my best friend of my younger sister, Jan. They wanted to take my sister off my aunt and uncle's hands. They loved her. They said, just have you come with us, but that would have looked bad in the image of like, we're nice people, we took in these nieces, and they wouldn't let her go there. So I made that phone call. They came over, got me immediately. I shared a bedroom with Jan Randolph, and the Hazens just took me under their wing. They took me, I got to use one of their son's cars to go to my summer job, and then they moved me into college, and I never had any place to go because there was no home to go to. So I worked my way through college and knew I wanted to be a teacher, and I stayed on campus all 4 years. I'm going to show a picture of my stepfather and my mom, because I think this is when I saw her the happiest. She's wearing her cowgirl boots. He's in his boots. And, it was the wild, wild west. And I think my mother really loved being out in the west, in Nebraska, in Wyoming, and being very happy with who we called Johnny Morgan. Daddy Morgan also lost his first wife in a train accident, and they had no children. So he's the oil well guy, and he lost part of his arm because he saved a young man who was trapped in a rig. And then I'm going to show you a picture of my sister, because she doesn't look anything like my brother and I. And I'm going to look for a better picture, but she spent whatever money, I don't know what she used for money, but she went to Patricia Stevens School, finishing school in Omaha, Nebraska, and learned to model. She's also a very talented, excellent artist, unlike me. My brother was so good, he was doing bronze sculpting and everything. And the trauma that she had in her life, unfortunately, led her to drinking. So she became an alcoholic. She was very suicidal, even when she was out here as an adult in Charlemont. And she just never really adjusted to all kinds of stuff. And I feel that if you get the therapy you need, or figure out what it is that you need to have to improve your life, this is where I come from. I feel the last time we packed up to leave for the summer, my sister and I said, we're just never coming back, and we're just going to run away. So if we truly had been runaway kids at 7th or 10th, 8th grade, that would have been about 8th grade, maybe 9th. She's a little younger, I don't know. I feel like God has always protected me through everything. Everything from the divorce and what was going on, everything from losing my mother and my stepfather, because I've always had other people step in and mentor me and take care of me. My Aunt Nanny became like my mother. I had Mrs. O in Charlemont who took me under her wing years later. And I had a woman named Mrs. Elias who took me under her wing. I'm not even sure how she knew that I had lost my mother, but when I was living with my stepmother, I walked, I guess, to the local church. My mother drug us always, kicking and screaming, to church, and we were the new kids. So when you have a group of kids and you're brand new, we were like, oh my gosh, we have to meet all these new people. And we only moved twice in Houston, Texas, I think. But she was Episcopalian. She was brought up Episcopalian. Her entire family is. And I felt like there was always somebody taking the place. Mrs. Elias took me to church. I was there every Sunday. I had a Southern Baptist upbringing down there in Texas in the South. And then I did youth group hay rides and all kinds of cool things. I went to whatever church I could walk myself to. And then later, when my kids were born, I became Sunday school superintendent, and I taught Sunday school, and I really got more involved in my religious background because I was teaching it to kids as well. I don't have a really good picture of my brother. I have one. He was a hippie, and his hair's down to here. And this particular picture was at the cremation of my sister's ashes. We threw some of her ashes into the Deerfield River, and then we saved this urn that my brother got for her when she passed. So she went first, and the same year that my sister died, I think that's the same year my father ended up passing. And then my brother died later on. But my brother was a true flower child, I would say, very hippie. Went on to be subsidized at Amherst College, and he was working on his PhD until when he passed away. So I've been varying relatives for quite some time, and friends now too at this age. But my urn is the same one that my brother chose for my sister. And then when we buried my brother's ashes, my kids were like, let's put the whole urn in there. That's where you're going to be. And I said no, because our plan was always to have the three of us. We have a few ashes of my sister in that urn, a few ashes of my brother. The rest of it is now up in Leverett Cemetery, and that's where my ashes will go as well. So, and actually this picture has my cousin Dale, and he's in Munich, and Linda. A lot of people were over here at the time when it was time to celebrate my life of my younger sister. I have a refrigerator magnet, and it says, "It's never too late to have a happy childhood." I have had this for years, and the way I look at it, I mean, I had a lot of Christmases that they were just, full of horrible memories, but if I'm going to believe that Christ the child was born on Christmas, then I just stopped thinking about the sadness of having that be a double funeral. At this point, it was pointless to dwell on that, and I'm happy to go through and fill out some of this book. This is about my Texas memories, and this one, I have this occasionally on my door. Mind your manners or you'll get the boot. And I feel like there's some good memories about Texas, and then there's not some good memories about Texas, which I think is what life is about. I will say that when I was in college, my Uncle Buck and Aunt Virginia found me and said, "We really wanted you, and we're not sure why you never came on out to Oregon." I have been out to Oregon several times and met the four boys. And Uncle Buck is now deceased. He's a famous author of Westerns. Aunt Virginia passed a while ago. My uncle showed up at college. He called me up because he knew I was at Kearney State College. And he said, "Can I take you out for dinner?" And I was like, ugh. So I said, sure. And he sat me down, just the two of us, and he was deeply ashamed of having thrown me out of the house. And again, it's a powerful woman and a man who couldn't think for himself and say, wait, does this make sense? He literally drove my sister and I know I'm backtracking now, but he drove my sister and I to the airport to cash in the ticket that he bought to ship my daughter down to Houston. And yet at that time, he was like, no, we never said we were going to do that. And I could be that came from my aunt, I'm not sure. But I accepted his apology, and the day I graduated from college, I knew I wanted to be back in New England. I would say to people, I'm a homing pigeon, and I have good memories of Nebraska and some reunions and everything, but I really belong right where I was born and right where I had the best time of my life as a 10th grader. And so we just ended up, we had one final big reunion. My father came up for it, and my grandfather passed away right afterwards because I think he just wanted to have one more time with his son. My Grammy Louise and Pop went down to see I think they must have driven to Texas, met my stepmother, came back and said, oh my word, we know what you girls put up with now, because I think she must have been horrid to them too. So anyway, I just think that if people can deal with a good therapist or trauma, then a lot of things can be solved. I did not fall apart because I had to take care of my brother. And then I took care of my sister, and I was raising 3 kids, and I was married. And so I spent a lot of my life being the caretaker. Even when you're a young kid, you're not supposed to be the caretaker. You're supposed to have parents that are caring for you. But my father and I did make up over the phone. I went to visit him when his aorta burst on the job. ICU, they put me up down there in Houston. I never thought I'd see him again. He doesn't remember those days. He was so sick. And then I went down another time. I took my oldest son. He and I drove down to see my dad. And my dad always used to say to my sister and I, I love you, baby. And I think that was his way of saying, well, I always loved you, but just didn't quite know how to get around this pushy woman that he was married to at the time. This is a quote from a woman named Pamela Reeve out of my life notebook. And it's entitled a little booklet, Faith Is. And I'll wrap it up with that. Faith is the assurance that God is perfecting his design for me when my life's course, once a swift flowing current, seems a stagnant pool. So I know I just kind of always have faith in everything. I'm not one that struggles with the news. I'm not an anxious person. I don't worry about a thing because I know who's in charge of my life, and I trust that particular individual. He's my creator. If you have any other questions or you want to find out how to order this legacy journal, I'm sure they make it for fathers as well, you can reach out to probably Bella, right? Or me. Yeah. You can. I can put out my email address, although my inbox is always a mess and I might not find you. I hate my inbox. If I get in there, I have all these things I have to do. But I will give it to anybody that wants to know more about either my father who flew paratroopers on D-Day or a good therapist. I fell apart for the most part when I had postpartum depression and finally realized I just can't keep taking care of everybody. Because if you do that, you can't take care of yourself after a certain point. So my email is pgoodwin, Goodwin, 038 @gmail.com. And you can see if I can find your email. Thanks for listening.